So I wanted to make a video talking about my first DMT trip, because these things get forgotten, of course. I've only had 2 trips. This video is a couple of days after my second trip, and the second trip was significant enough that I'm already starting to not forget what happened during the first trip, but it's the memories of the first trip are kind of being replaced by the second trip. I did a live video of the second trip, so that's fine, so I don't need to remember that in this moment, but I do want to remember the first trip because it was incredibly powerful. I'm going to jumble around a little bit, so it's not going to be one story and then give the revelations. It's not going to be recounting the trip and then giving the revelations. I'll be jumbling around because it's been about a month, so the integration period. I had a solid week of really intense integration where it was complicated trying to sleep. I'm going to cover my face because I can't quite see myself. Much better. There we go. So I had about a week of integration after my first trip, where I was getting lots of flashes, and the meanings were being unlocked thanks to the cipher, the codex that was given to me. I'll elaborate on that more. Essentially, the first trip started, I was in this chair, and I'd spent about a month planning ahead of time. I was trying to watch my diet, eat sunshine, as it were. I'd been exercising, I'd quit drinking, I'd quit coffee, yeah, so I was nervous going in, of course, but I wanted to do it properly. I wanted to make sure that I had the right mindset, I had good people with me, and yeah, so let's just get into it. First and foremost, what I did was I sat and I meditated. I wanted to sit and clear my mind of all sense and thought, and I just wanted a blank canvas for everything to be uncorrupted, would you say, unadulterated. And yeah, so I did that, and I breathed out completely, and I had one full breath vape, and then I set it down. My goal was not to look for a breakthrough. I didn't want to have a breakthrough. I wanted to have a taste. I wanted to see if the things I already understood about life in the universe and my place in it were accurate. It was a very spiritual endeavor, if you will. I wanted to see what I understood already. Boy, did I get what I wanted. So I took the vape in, and first thing that occurred was I became very aware of my core, of my glowy core in here, and I was given I didn't see as much as I perceived. I didn't get visuals as much as I did. I got vibrations and algorithms that I was able to overlay memes and imagery and archived memories. So I feel I didn't get much new stuff, but what I did get was I allowed my archives to be opened up and then presented to me by the higher in storybook form, and the trip was essentially pulling knowledge out of me and then putting it in front of me in a particular order so that I could make sense of what I was seeing. When I saw my bright glowy core, I was shown that I breathe through myself, and I eat myself. I was eating myself, a lot like a Dementor in Harry Potter. So I was breathing in my glow, and I did that for a couple of breaths, and then I was catapulted right out of this physical form. I was able to see the layers of closest reality, the closest parallel realities, like an onion, like onion layers that were just outside my egg. So I was an egg wrapped in an onion, and I was being catapulted out through all of those onion layers so fast, countless layers. Maybe I won't say countless, but it was so fast I couldn't keep count. And I was immediately taken to a sort of a grassland, a rolling grassland, and in the half distance there was a proud and beautiful tree, and under it were two figures, a male and a female. My overlay told me that they were angels, young angels. I had the distinct impression, I knew, in fact, I felt it going into the trip, that the higher had been waiting for me, had been planning and preparing my arrival. They wanted to receive me. They wanted to show me what I was looking for. I've had many years of uncertainty. I'll make a video on the cause of that. So I walked towards these two angels, a male figure and a female figure, the masculine and feminine energy, I should say. And they had under this tree, they'd obviously planned a sort of a picnic, where it was just going to be blissful, quiet, tranquil, serene, and we were going to sit under this tree, and we were going to have quiet conversations while flicking through this giant tome, pages and pages and pages of wisdom and understanding and higher perspectives. I was only able to see the first paragraph, potentially. It was strange because I was both under the tree and approaching them. And I kind of got a glimpse of the first paragraph, and then while I'm still approaching the tree, I felt 100 black claw-like hands grabbing me from behind and pulling me backwards. And it was not scary, it was not painful, it was not horrifying, but it was distinctly separate and distinctly dark compared to the bright and serene what was in front of me. What behind me was dark and desperate. At this, there was a clear panic in the masculine and feminine eyes of the light beings in front, and I seemed to understand that they were calling in help, because this was not going to plan. But like I said, I wasn't scared because I went in looking to embrace everything that I was about to experience. I felt safe, even though this was going on and the light beings weren't impressed at all. Anyway, so they called for help, and instantly, almost before they were done asking for help, paladins came riding over the horizon from behind the tree and towards me. And when I say paladins, I mean these were golden armored clad knights on horseback, giant, if you will, not titanic, but like just massive and purposeful cavalry charge coming straight towards me and past me into the clawing mass that was pulling me backwards. And as they passed me, one of these cavalry of light. I don't want to say light cavalry because they were definitely heavy cavalry, but they were of light. They were made of light, as I understand. Anyway, one of the cavalrymen was able to brush me aside with a gauntlet with a hand, or maybe it was the shoulder of the horse or something. But I was very, very forcefully bumped to this side, and in doing this, everything that was me was completely broken apart. I like to use the analogy that was stacked magnets, so like the small disc magnets, and there were. It's almost as if there was the mind, the body, the soul, the consciousness, and I only learned that it was these separate mind, body, soul, and consciousness. Yeah, so 4 magnets split apart, and they were each cast to different senses of reality, different perspectives, different parallel universes, if you will. Although some of them weren't parallel, some of them were totally different. And then the trip was the planned trip, I should say. The planned trip was put on hold because it was a case of, okay, this is a crisis right here. This is not going to plan. And damage control was put into place, and I was then subject to what was a crisis response, if you will. It was no longer about the trip, it was about dealing with the situation that I happened to find myself in. The first thing that occurred was that my consciousness was placed into a shoebox universe. And when I say a shoebox universe, it was very, very small. I mean, it was literally one room, the size of the room that I was in. It was this. It looked like this exact room that I'm sat in now, but it wasn't this room, and it wasn't even in this universe. It was a shoebox universe created specifically to house my consciousness while everything else was going on with the other 3 aspects of me. In the shoebox universe, my friends were here, facsimiles of my friends were here, but their consciousness was being transmitted into these facsimile forms. Everything was holographic. Yeah, so while I was in this, I was aware of what was going on, and I was aware I was being consoled by call them a crisis response counselor, if you will. I know for certain there was by the door there was a distinctly masculine figure, almost like a nurse or an orderly in a hospital or a psych ward. Not that I would know, of course, but this benevolent figure was there to offer support, much like a bouncer. A powerful presence, to be sure, but benevolent, or just looking to make sure that I'm okay. I was told, do not leave this shoebox, do not leave this room, do not leave this realm. You are in here for a good reason. We've put you here for a good reason. Just trust us, everything will be okay. And I was like, cool, because I wasn't anxious. I felt no anxiety throughout any of this, I should be clear. I was experiencing awe. While I was sat in this shoebox universe waiting for everything to play out, I was being shown images of very violent images of um, cosmic occurrences, supernova, asteroid showers, entire planets breaking apart and forming, coalescing again over time. Um, but everything was happening so fast, yet I was distinctly aware that each second was millions of years. It was like how when one talks about how, oh yeah, an asteroid belt slowly forms into a planet over millions, billions of years, whatever it is, and then coalesces and it becomes one again. I was being shown this imagery, I'm certain, because they were wanting to communicate to me that although my four fragments had been blown apart to the farthest reaches of reality, even though there was multiple realities, and um, I would reconverge, I would coalesce. So there was that. But again, I feel like my words aren't doing it justice because it was so big. It was so massive, so out of this world. I was the sun. I was the stars. I was the galaxies forming, spinning around, so that I could understand them from a first-person perspective. I was no longer abstracting cosmic flow. I was cosmic flow and could understand it from the inside, while sitting in this shoebox universe and not being allowed to move. It was fantastic. Also, while I was in this shoebox universe, I was aware that as the trip progressed and the DMT effects were starting to fade, I was aware that I was coming back down through the layers, but I wasn't losing any awareness as I was doing so. The awareness that I gained, or insight I gained, perspective that I had, was staying true, even though I was coming back down through the levels. So I met, I want to say, a yogi. I met a yogi. I was this yogi. We inhabited the same form for a time. I honestly feel like I was possessing him, he was possessing me, and we bonded, and it was really lovely. But what was particularly magical was the very, very distinct conversation, very brief conversation that I had with this yogi, as he was supposed to be teaching a class of school kids. It was I couldn't see these children, but it was very obvious to me that this teacher was sat in a sort of a cross-legged fashion, and he's supposed to be giving wisdom to the children, these primary school kids. And it was strange, I could not see them, but I could understand that they were very confused why teacher is all of a sudden having a conversation with himself, and talking about this the spirit of this white man has just entered my body, and the kid's like, they must have been about 5-6 years old, something like this, very, very confused. But it was really wholesome and lovely. Anyway, I said, thank you for housing me while I find my own body, as it were. And he said, oh, no, not a problem. He was a lovely man. I'd love to meet him and drink tea. Anyway, so at that point I was returned to my body. While all of this was going on, of course, while my consciousness was in the shoebox universe for safekeeping, my mind was essentially being defragged like a hard drive. The higher powers had essentially taken the opportunity to remove all of the nonsense that had been put in there or been absorbed. And then what they did was they took all of my archived wisdoms and understandings that I've accumulated in this life, and potentially others, depending on how one sees things, was organized, cross-referenced, laminated, labeled, whatever you want to call it. But it was as if the tome that I saw at the beginning was the amount of my mind available to me, and then the first paragraph was everything I know and understand. Um, and it was like they gave me a codex, a code that I would then be able to access wisdoms that they could not give me during the trip because there wouldn't be time. So they took my mind, my computer, they defragged it, archived everything. They created this a library, a quick access library, a reference library. There we go, and gave me trying to think of the word. Gave me a codex, a key, whatever it's called, so that I could then understand things later on. That felt incredible. I was because just saying it like that doesn't do it justice. I could literally feel the neurons, and I could feel the wiring change, and it felt like my brain was being overclocked to its maximum potential. So everything was throbbing, and I don't mean like throbbing like one gets a headache, like it's a throbbing. It felt like it was just being supercharged, not like a battery, but excess flow. It's like if you increase the pressure on a hose pipe. Almost, it's like, okay, how much can we increase the pressure on this hose pipe so it stretches but doesn't burst? It was how much water can we get through these wires without them frying. It was incredibly intense, and I was aware of every fiber of my brain while they were working on it. It was awesome. Didn't hurt, but it wasn't pleasant. But I knew I could trust the process. I don't think I had the choice, actually. It was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. So that was my consciousness in the parallel universe. My mind was being worked on. My body, I was not allowed to access. It was so high. I wasn't aware of my body. I lost form. I wasn't allowed to look at my body. I wasn't allowed to look at the universe that my body resides in. That was not allowed. That was not permitted. I don't know why. I was out of body. But when I came back to my body, I was distinctly aware of how high it was. How it was so intensely vibrational. It was crazy. When I re-entered my body, as the trip was fading, I was aware that the four-faced statues, we'll call them that, I was distinctly aware that the body that I was put back into was mine, but it was mine in a parallel universe. Again, I wasn't allowed to come back into my body right away. So for the rest of that day, in fact, and for the next day or two, I was trying to relocate my default body, if you will, my normal body, the one that I spend the most time in, rather than these parallel bodies. And during that process, it was quite interesting seeing my spirit from the wrong side. So the four-faced statues, if you will, one facing forwards, two to the sides, and one to the back. It was like a corkscrew, almost, levels. So like as I go down through a level, I'm facing this way, and if I go up through a level, I'm facing this way. And those four move like this, like a corkscrew. and it was trying to, and I was trying. I say we. I was trying to. We were trying to figure out which one was the right one. I got there eventually, but I did notice that I wasn't facing out of my face. I was facing out the back of my head. While still being able to see out the front of my face. It was tricky. Imagine that. My soul was clearly being fought over and ripped apart. This was the most interest. I won't say the most interesting, but it was distinctly different from everything else. I was aware that there was this to use a nobly simplistic term, there was a battle for my soul between the cavalry of light and the shadow clawing hands. I was placed in the shoebox universe, I realise, I was told, because the higher did not want me to witness what was occurring with my soul, because it was being the darker hands, the darker manifest hands were pulling it to pieces as I was being pulled away from the light. So chunks were being ripped apart, and the soul felt all of that. But thankfully, for better or worse, I was not conscious of it because I was placed in the shoebox universe. The consciousness was placed over there while the mind was being worked on. The soul was being fought over. And I had every confidence that the higher, the lighter entities would be victorious and bring all my pieces back to me, but it did take a significant amount of time. After I was placed back in my body, after my consciousness was placed back in my body, and I was in the afterglow period, I could feel pieces landing back into me. It's like, oh, there's a lung, and oh, there's a kidney. It was quite surreal, that realizing and feeling that the organs themselves had this soul energy, and that they were very distinctly from spirit. I'm using spirit and consciousness interchangeably here, I feel. And whereas the soul was definitely something separate from that. It was all emotion based. If you all emotions stem from the soul, but the soul wasn't solely comprised of emotions. It was lots going on there. So all these pieces were being pulled apart and put back together. I'm certain it would have been excruciating. I'm certain it would have been torturous had I been present. But I was saved that, so I'm very grateful for that, of course. When I was asking during that was the majority of the trip. A lot of the answers to the "oh my goodness, wow, that was so incredible" stuff, what did it mean kind of stuff, that was came later. It took a good 2-3 days for me to be able to integrate everything that occurred, and then use the reference library that I was given to make sense of anything. But once I'd learned, I could access. Once I learned the language that they were using, that it was metaphor, that it was memetics, that it was, they gave me the shorthand, and then all I had to do was run the shorthand through a translation matrix, and then look at the colors and labels, and then reference it in the archive memory that they had defragged and organized for me. It was divinely simple, the way that they roadmapped the process for me. So it wasn't. It was complex, but it wasn't difficult. Um, so, what did I learn? What was I shown? Like I said before, I don't feel like I was given any new knowledge, but everything was quantified and qualified and struggling for words. Since I'm going too fast. Everything was quantified and qualified, and then was shown to have relative importance, or should I say relative insignificance. I was shown later, because for a couple of days there, I felt like it was positive and negative. I was still operating in a dualistic mindset, whereby there was good and then there was evil. But then over time I remembered and I realized, but I don't think that way, not usually. So I mean, it's easier to use those terms in conversation for folks, but I realized that actually no, what was occurring was these shadowy hands were not evil, they were not demonic or hellish. They were desperate, they were famished, they were devoid of light and beauty, and wisdom and everything that is pure and good. It was oblivion that they were from, not hell. And that made me realize that I feel it's true that there is no hell, that there is no sin, not in a transcendent way. There are definitely hellish and sinful things that we as humans can do to each other on this plane, but they do not translate into the higher realms. It is not interesting. Perhaps it does go down into the lower realms, but it doesn't translate up. So when I was shown that these desperate, clawing hands were desperate, were famished, I didn't feel fear, I felt pity. I pitied them because I was already so much more vibrant and higher in consciousness than they were, that they were acting on pure instinct, like a starving person would if they saw the opportunity to grab some food. And I realized that they were as much clutching for my light and beauty as I clutch for the light and beauty of the higher. It was humbling at the same time as being harrowing. So there was that. I also realized that I could relax a little more. I didn't have to put so much pressure on myself to grow and be perfect. I have to be careful that I'm not using wisdoms that I've interpreted from the second trip in this. I felt like I remembered that I'm here to have this experience in this lifetime and then transmit that knowledge up. I'm going to pause as I think of where I want to go, because I want to be very careful that I don't conflate the two trips. So I'm just going to pause. So essentially I was shown that there was no sin, and that when when I look at the world through this new perspective, it helps me make more sense of what I see and understand and previously understood to be evil behavior by people, by groups of peoples. It has its place, and they have their mission here to act out that life and learn what that feels like, and then at the end of their lives, when they re-enter Source, they will be given that perspective as they'll be given the perspective of the effects of their actions, and Source will be given the perspective of what it is to be in that position to affect those, to cause those effects, as it were. This plane is a sandbox, essentially, and we, the higher consciousnesses, are using this plane as a way to act out possibility and live out experience, much like when people play video games. They are given avatars, and then they enter this sandbox world, and then they go out and they're able to explore, and they're able to encounter ideas and concepts and challenges and injustice, and they're able to be rebellious or to go along with the status quo, and it all provides the player with this enriching experience, and that's what I was essentially shown, was that the life this plane is a game, is a construct, is a vehicle for spirit to experience life. So during I'm getting tired. During the integration process that occurred over a couple of days, the way that happened was through flashes and imagery, and, as I say, throwing ideas at me. Like, if I hadn't had the trip, I think I was getting mini strokes almost. It would be like seemingly random flashes of experience in life and sentences, memories. Some of them are lived memories, others are things that I've read or witnessed or watched in a video or a movie or something like this. Kind of like the cliche where you have someone who's spiritually attuned but not quite aware, and every time they change channel, a new sentence comes up, but we can see that in actual fact it's showing a whole thought, entire trains of thought, even though it's flicking channels. That's what it felt like. It was kind of like that. But so out of the chaos of these flashes, it was up to me to figure out the sense that was coming to me by using the archive, the reference library that I had been given, thanks to the defrag. I was exhausted. I was absolutely exhausted after 3 or 4 days of this, because not only had I had a really intense trip, and I was having to deal with all of the emotional and the awe of seeing, not just figuring out, but finally seeing my place, finally seeing how it all worked. Oh, I've just remembered something else that I experienced in that. Was I didn't get any downtime after the trip. I wasn't tripping for 4 days. I was tripping for about 20 minutes. But the ability, no, less than that even, 10, 15 minutes. But it took several days for me to process and understand what I experienced in those 10 minutes, because time didn't exist. As I said before, the there was millions of years per chapter, maybe, in a whole book of experience. If I was to go into the actual details, into the actual science, and it would take several lifetimes to study enough about the various aspects of what I understood: philosophy, spirituality, religion, science, cosmology, quantum mechanics. It would take several lifetimes to become PhD level in all of these things, to be able to paint the picture enough to make sense to everybody that wasn't me or experiencing it. Because when I was in that place, everything just made sense. I was not using my computer, my mind. I was using the collective computer. Put it that way. I was while my mind was being worked on, I had access to the collective computer, and as a result, all of the imagery made sense effortlessly. I just understood it, and it was incredible. It was awesome. It was so magical and such a privilege. And then, as I say, once they had worked on my computer and they'd reinstalled my consciousness upon it, into it, the tiny little bit that is my pitiful brain, my pitiful mind, in comparison to this collective computer, was still supercharged and state of the art and just amazing. One of the things that I remembered is during the trip, I was able to see the room from the other side of the wall, if you will. I was able to, as I already understood, I was able to see how we are mostly empty space. We're made up of atoms, and atoms are mostly empty, as we know. So the quantum mechanics and moving through matter was child's play, because it's like, well, there's more space than there is stuff, so just don't hit the stuff. And my consciousness was able to weave through reality effortlessly, because it was like I was a tiny little spaceship, and I was moving in between planets and moons, you know. So if one wants a sense of scale of how easy it was to avoid the planets, avoid the different parts of the atom, the nuclei, the protons, neutrons, whatever they're called, but I could do that everywhere, and I could see everything from the inside. Because even solid things, like I could see a table from the inside of the table. I could see a stone from the inside of a stone. I was everywhere and in everything, and there was no separate stuff. It was just, everything was just collections of atoms moving at different frequencies. But hey, they were still mostly not there, so it was easy to move through everything, and that was an incredible feeling. It was so connecting. It was being able to see how connected everything is while traveling through it as if it didn't even exist, because there was so much space, so much potential. it was out of this world. You know, even that saying is so cliche, but we don't have the language. Um, so there was this. Um, it was an incredibly liberating experience because for many years leading up to my trip, I understood certain facts of reality. Um, some were innate, some were learned through meditation and shamanic ritual using marijuana, using weed. I hadn't smoked weed in 10 years because I had such a transcendent experience with it. With no preparation, I had no idea what was happening. But I called it. I had my whoosh moment where, well, I'll make a video on that at some point. But that scared me off drugs, basically. Not that one experience right away, but once I sobered up, and I don't mean from that particular instance, but when I got clean, I should say, I often revisited that moment in my memory and went, yeah, okay, well that's not what I want to do. I don't want to be experiencing that because it was too intense. I wasn't prepared for it. Anyway, where was I going with that? So when I came back from my DMT trip, that was it. I was so grateful that I was given the perspective I needed in order to make sense of what I understood about the world already, what I understood about the life already, the universe already, spirituality already. My first trip put everything into place, and having that all click was incredibly liberating. I could only sit back and laugh at how disjointed I had been before, and the perspective, the high perspective that I brought back from the trip was almost like when one looks back on one's foolish childhood and goes, oh my goodness, I can't believe I thought that, I can't believe I felt that, I can't believe I did that, I can't believe this, that or the other. Wasn't I silly? If only I had known then what I know now. That is the feeling that I was left with at the end of my trip, because everything made sense, and I no longer had the same kinds of anxieties about being mad, about being dysfunctional, about being broken, because in my own unique way everything was exactly the way it was meant to be. I just didn't have the perspective on how well everything fit together, truly. So yeah, so I felt serene and at home. The whole experience can be summed up as I went home. I went home for a weekend. I went home for a week, whatever it was. That's what the first trip felt like. It was a sense of going home. Yeah, okay, the world's been mean to you, but don't worry, you're gonna go home, and you're gonna walk through your childhood kitchen, and there's gonna be freshly made cake or bread or whatever, and you get to sit on the chair at your childhood table, and the window's open, and you can hear birds and bees buzzing, birds tweeting, bees buzzing outside the window, and you're sat on this chair, and your feet don't touch the ground, and kicking your feet forwards while eating a piece of bread with homemade jam on it, and everything was just glorious and safe and beautiful. That's what my first DMT trip felt like. Childish innocence and the feeling of going home. Can't think of a better place to end this video. So, thanks for watching it through, and I'll make more videos going forwards.